Rethinking Legal Ops. I'm Aishwarya Saxena, head of legal at Speed Legal, your host. And at Rethinking Legal Ops, we have forward thinking conversations about the many ways the integration of law and technology are changing the way we practice law. And today we have an amazing guest with us, Chad. A lot of you probably already know about him because he does amazing legal influencer work, spreading really good messages about tech adoption and just life in general, which is very refreshing to see in the legal industry. And Chad also has extensive experience as a GC. Chad, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Oh, thank you for having me. So I'm Chad Aboud. I'm general counsel of a portfolio of companies with the umbrella brand being Audienceview. And what we do is we provide B2B and B2C to the live events industry. So software and B2C properties focused on theaters and sports and all kinds of fun stuff that people love to do with their time. And I've been there for the last 3.5 years. And before that, I was at one of Canada's largest retail and e-tail brands. And before that, I was at a national law firm doing public company, private company, M&A, and finance.
Great. Awesome. That's a lot of really good experience. And tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are today. What has been your academic and professional journey? And especially, how did you become interested in legal technology?
Yeah, so my background was when I went to law school, I did a combined MBA program that was offered at the law school I was going to. So that was cool because it got you into all kinds of different ways of thinking. It wasn't 100% finals and group work and thinking about real life, case studies that had happened to companies. And so that was probably the beginnings of like being really interested in a whole bunch of different functions beyond the law. The courses were like that. The people who went there were coming from all those different sectors. And so it got me thinking about it. And then thinking about the operations, as you typically do in business school through the case study, also got me thinking about operations and efficiency and process and what makes life easier for people. So that was probably where it started. And then when I was practicing in a law firm doing transactions, when you're early days, youngest person on the file, you're doing a lot of, grunt work, heavy lifting. And I very quickly was saying, okay, well, these things seem valuable. These things seem a lot less valuable to the total ROI of this deal, but they're like a predominantly heavy part or disproportionate part of the transaction. Why are we doing this when we can rely on these other things we're already doing anyway? And this is only gives us just a little bit more value, but for such an amount of time. And this was 10, 15 years ago, especially as well, and wasn't getting a lot of traction about we should cut out those parts of the deal and just do these. It was kind of, we've got it steady as she goes. And so for me, I started seeing already that I was interested in process efficiency and like less friction and doing things as efficiently as possible and different ways of thinking about doing the work. So I could already tell that was like going on in my mind. And then when I moved into industry about 6 or 7 years ago, we used like kind of an early days CLM, like get all your historic contracts in there. It's gonna, read it. And got some message. Let's just. And then I realized that, there was a way to get support around contract management, identifying what the relevant pieces were, reminders so that you didn't have to do it yourself. And I really liked that. And it was early days, so the technology was still growing. There was a lot of people kind of behind the technology as well. But I thought this is a way, a dashboard, a shared space, like trying to bring out apples to apples pieces so that you could kind of rationalize your contract set and remind yourself to do something with it. And so that was around like 2016. And I thought to myself, like, there's definitely something here and this industry is going to grow. And, I really liked it. And so when I shifted into building this legal function at Audienceview, the portfolio of companies was really scaling at that time, going from pure enterprise to, like lots of mid-market clients. And with that exponential growth, it couldn't stay one-to-one manual, filling in those yellow highlighted fields in a Word document. Like there was no way to do that anymore. We needed, automated contracting that was driven out of like a CRM tool for all kinds of reasons. And so that was really the biggest shift for me. So, about 2.5 years ago, we ended up implementing automated contracting driven out of our CRM tool with a Legaltech bolted on top of it. And that was, a massive, implementation piece of work and experience for me that I really loved. And so that kind of brought me really into the depths of legal tech and legal ops.
Yeah. And that's a very interesting journey, and you've been very thoughtful and decisive as to the directions that you wanted to go in, and also very sort of like the way that you've thought about it is also very strategic, very sort of business-like, and reflects from your background, the JD MBA program. Very, very, very interesting to hear. Thanks for sharing that. And I'm sure at Audience View, this style of thinking is valuable because especially today the legal teams are integrating more and more with the business, like the sales team, the strategy teams. It's not just like that one department that just does its own thing. So I actually want to hear some of your perspective about how lawyers are beginning to think more like businessmen today. Is this something that's just started with people like you, or has this something that's existed in the legal industry even before? And what do you think has been the driving force to change this role of general counsels or lawyers within a company?
Good question. I don't think it's the legal industry itself proactively driving this change. I think it's a reaction to the demand of the business. So I think it's, if we think about the last 5 years, technology generally, and legal tech as well, but technology generally has just like expanded the use case for what a company can do so exponentially that I think it's pretty impossible now for humans to really be the sole driving force of supporting that level of scale. I just think it's possible. And so not only is it operationally impossible, then companies want to extract the data value that they're getting from this exponential increase. Well, how is it possible to extract that value if humans are kind of, rowing the ship? It's just not doable. And so I think if you're, a legal function in one of those types of companies, typically tech, but other industries too, I think it's been a reaction to the demand. Like every function has to operate this way. There is no, we're different and we can do it differently, because especially if you're in like B2B tech, however you contract with your clients, that's how you capture revenue for your company. And there's going to be a demand on capturing revenue at scale. And so if you don't have a process that matches the business demand for scale, you don't work. Like you don't work within that business. And very quickly you'll be found out because you won't be able to keep up if you're just using humans. And so I think it's kind of been a reaction. And then through that reaction, you've kind of got this group of lawyers that are now saying, and this is pretty cool. And I like it, and this is better for me, because once you do it, you realize the benefits so quickly. And I think that's now where you're starting to see the proactive piece come in, where you're seeing all these folks who have experienced the benefits now saying, wow, okay, what next?
Yep, yep. And that, I think, it's a very exciting time to be a lawyer, and when like all of these things are changing, and like just the way of practicing law in itself is changing, and in response to all these different market forces. With regards to technology, how much coding or just how much of a tech background does a lawyer need to have in order to really leverage tech tools, or none at all?
I I I would say none or almost none, and for a few reasons. Like one is enough people, almost regardless of age and stage right now, are using apps themselves just as users. And so we're fairly familiar with like the process and the use case of like how you put in information and how you use it and how you consume. And so we actually know the user journey probably better than we think. So there's that. I think also like there's ops teams either embedded within sales and account management, or if you can create your own legal ops people that aren't lawyers that are running the tools anyway. So like legal tech is just tech. If you have a CRM system, you're probably going to have a CRM admin or someone who manages or multiple people. And so you're going to have these skills already within the company. I would not advocate for lawyers who do not have these skills to be the owners of it for many, many reasons. That talent lives with people who have grown up managing those tools. They're more efficient at it. There's more of them. There's more of that skill in the market. And I'm not sure that lawyers, should be trying to wade into that space full on. Like you want to understand it, but is that really where your value prop is? Unless you grew up with that skill, I don't know. I think you just got to be cognizant of the journey, cognizant of the build, understand what it takes to maintain it. But I actually don't think that you need to go into the weeds on it, and it definitely should not be a barrier to you from wanting to implement it.
Mhm. Absolutely, and especially right after the pandemic, that sort of tech adoption has not just become like the cool thing that some people are doing. It has now become the need.
Yeah,
Who would have thought that we would be signing so many contracts, negotiating so many contracts just virtually, just over
right.
Zoom, and sending them for e-signature? I think the pandemic has really sort of broken through just that, maybe that mental or like that cultural barrier that I don't want to, have much to do with technology. Now you have to. Just within
Right.
that context, just after the pandemic, how important do you think, just from an operational perspective, it has become for both businesses, primarily like small SMEs, to plan for resource allocation with regards to their legal ops, and where does legal tech fit in there? How important is it for planning those types of legal operations?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty quickly, my guess is going to be 24 months, that it's not going to be like so innovative to have done in legal tech implementation. Like, I think especially if you're working in like a fast-paced industry, like tech obviously comes to mind, but there's others. If you don't have experience implementing legal tech, like that's not gonna be normal. I think it's gonna be uncommon. I actually think it's a table stakes function of the business, because I think lawyers have said for a long time, yeah, we're trusted business advisors, or we want to be trusted business advisors. I don't worry about what people say, I worry about what they do. And so, how do you prove that to people? Well, you've got to act much more in line with how the business does. Like, you are not the business as the legal team. That's what law firms are. Law firms are their own business, so they can choose to act how they want. If you're in house, you joined a business. So you got to figure out how they act, and then you've got to, shape yourself, according to that, because otherwise, why would you be trusted? Why would you be a business advisor if you don't act in accordance with the business? So for me, it's going to be like 1,000% you're going to need legal tech if you're in a fast moving space. Even if you just want to support data management, like you're going to need it. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to report on anything. People are going to keep looking to you to give KPIs or some other way to justify your existence or to build your team. You're not going to have the data for it. So you're going to need those tools. And then on
Yep.
the legal ops front, I think there's kind of one of two ways you can take it. I've done both. One is you can kind of have a very strong relationship with a team who has ops people for the tech that supports them. So automated contracting tools that typically support sales and account management. They typically have ops people because they got to manage their CRM system. So as long as you have integrated the tech in a way that the sales and account management teams see the value for them, you can typically leverage some of their ops people to help with the integration, because it's important for revenue capture for those teams, and they already have the skills. If it's not a tool that is so integrated with another team, you may need a legal ops person. And here's the value of that, I think, is that number one, doesn't have to be a lawyer. So first of all, that also helps with budgeting too sometimes, because it's a bigger pool of people you can go to with a broader set of skills. But I also think if it's not your natural skill set, diversifying a whole bunch of more operational things to lawyers does not feel very efficient to me. They're not good at it. They're not going to want to do it. They're not going to do it well. So instead, centralize that into someone who actually has that skill and passion and will wake up every day thinking about it. And then that frees up the lawyers to like give feedback to that function, but to actually do what they're paid to do and to do that part well. So whether you get legal ops or not might depend on the tool, but I think either way, you're going to have a piece of technology that shows the value of what you do, or that brings value to the other teams.
Yep. Very, very, very good points about just sort of letting lawyers do and excel at what they do best. Like dealing with complex legal situations, like giving advice, things like that, and having a very effective legal ops division within your department. I cannot stress more the importance of legal ops units. And also from the perspective of other teams within a business. And again, I'm mostly talking about SMEs. Um, how important are legal tech tools for non-lawyer team members? For example, like your finance team or your sales team, who rely a lot on their in-house counsel to give them advice on the different types of proposals, quotations, and agreements that they're getting. How useful is legal tech there, both to those teams and also to maybe reduce some burden on an in-house?
I mean, so obviously there's so many tools that are super valuable to them, but I think the most important thing is to figure out what is their pain, not yours, and what is their win, not yours. because to be honest, most of the time they're not that fussed about what legal's wins or pains are. And so, for me, when I showed up, I said, okay, this company's scaling from, enterprise, so small number of accounts, but large value, to, lots of accounts as well, because through some acquisitions. And so I said to myself, well, it's going to be impossible for me, and I don't want to, but it's going to be impossible for me to do kind of the more admin style of like helping populate this, like Word documents to form agreements. It's not going to make sense. But who cares about that? Nobody else cares. What I took out of that was, all right, so if we're now going to the mass market and sales is going to be doing lots of deals at the same time, growing the sales team, well, how are they going to achieve that? They can't be coming to a lawyer as a gatekeeper when they're trying to move things in mass at different time zones around the world. Or account management, they're not just dealing with 100 clients where you can work with an Excel sheet to figure out values and data. Now you have thousands, so how are you going to do that? Well, it has to be in the CRM system. And so I think if you're a lawyer in an SME, don't worry about, and if you're trying to support other teams, don't worry about what you think is better and worse. Have an idea about what would help your team. But the story and the value is the other team's story, not yours. And that's how you get buy-in, because then other people are like, yeah, that would make my life better. That would make it easier. I want that. And then you're like, great, I know the solution to that. And then you just layer in the legal part underneath it. But don't make that the story, because not many other people care.
Yep. Yeah. And it's a very important point about wanting to having the curiosity to learn, what the pain points within different departments are, because they would all be very different. And for any type of tool to be successful, it's so important to just target that properly, and then maybe like advocate for that or push for that, which is a more sort of a natural process. How is community building to communicate these sort of maybe like benefits or like legal tech tools, or just to drive more adoption of legal tech tools? How where does community building fit into all that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think about work relationships the way I think about personal relationships. I don't think they're different. I don't think just because a human shifted from a personal thing about taking their kid to school or whatever, and now they're working, that they're a different person. They're the same person. And so if you're not trying to use curiosity and humility to form bonds with people, then they don't care. And they'll treat you as a transaction and a commodity. And there's going to be no trusted business advisor. There's going to be no community building. And so for me, I'm naturally pretty curious, but I think it matters to care about the human that you're talking to and to learn about them, and not in a way that you're ready to place value propositions on what they say. Simply just to be curious and have the humility to know that everyone's different and everyone's on a different journey at a different time. And all you're trying to do is info gather. Because the more intel you have, the more you ask people about themselves, the more they like you. They don't even know why they like you, they do. That's just because foundational human 101 is people want to express themselves and they want to feel like other people care. It's a nice trait, right? And if you tap into just general humanity, that's how you form the bonds. And once you start forming bonds with people and they see you care and you're interested in trying to use the information to make life better for them, that's when you start forming community. And once you're building a community, you have trust. And when you have trust, if someone says, this is my pain, I wish I could solve this pain, and you say, I think I've got the solution to solve that pain, they trust you. And so then that's the way that you can bring tools in that lift them and lift you. But it starts with forming a bond at the human level. Otherwise, you're just talking in transactions, and transactions are commodities.
Yep, exactly. And just tapping into the human element, just treating people, just like regular persons, rather than like, like you've got the work face and then you just like treat them very coldly. I think that's something that's really, really changing in law as well. It's becoming less and less formal. And I think it's thanks to, people like you who are doing all that, driving that sort of change by just being open and candid, on your LinkedIn, and just sharing that we're just people. We get stressed. We have good days and bad days. Which brings me to my next question about mental health and law. It's not a secret. Mental health is not, on average, is not really great amongst lawyers. Stressful jobs, working too much, sleeping too little, resting a little too little, not even just a little too much. I was about to say a little too much, but not resting enough. And this whole culture around it being cool to, just like tell your friends, like, hey, I just pulled like 2 all-nighters. Like, oh, like I don't even have breakfast. I just have coffee. Um, that is, of course, changing now with people becoming more and more aware of mental health. Do you think automation or leveraging tech tools to automate the tedious parts of our work? Do you think that can have a positive impact even on mental health for lawyers, or just overall reducing stress?
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, I felt it myself. Every tech tool that I've brought in has like dramatically reduced the amount of like more administrative work that you're doing. It's just not possible to continue doing that level of administration over a long period of time. It just burns people down. And so I think you have to have it as like a base level to make the job appealing. And then beyond that, like you also still have to, it's a job that where there can be a lot of pressure at different times. And so, you got to be eyes wide open to that. But, bringing in, assets that help is massively important. But I also think that there's like a human asset to it too. Like, we focus so much on like what people are doing wrong or badly or can improve upon. Like, do you know how much power there is in telling people what they did that's amazing? Because then people realize where their talents are. And when people realize where their talents are, their unique skill sets, they blow those out. And then you can find ways to redirect the things that they're not as strong at. So whether you're using tools to manage against the things they're not as good at, or whether you're using coaching to do that, I think that's how you're going to reduce the stress. Like, I think we're fighting it at the wrong end. We're talking about like, the stress of the work. It's a stressful job, and it's very like labor intensive in your mind. And that part of it is not really going to change. I think it's really about how we treat the parts that are in the lower tier that we can manage out. And half of that is tool. And then half of that is just human behavior. We've got to bring more humanity to this thing.
Exactly. And it reminds me also of a conversation I had in one of the previous episodes of this podcast with Colin Levy from Malbec. And he was also emphasizing, he also posts a lot about mental health, which I truly appreciate. And he was saying something similar to what you're saying, is that for any sort of tech tool, that relationship that you build with your client, and walking them through like even seeing the benefits of the tool in the first place, and then adapting to it, using it, getting the most value out of it, that is just so vital. Your tool does not necessarily have to be like 100% accurate, but if you've got a good relationship with the client, you can work through that and communicate more effectively with people, which very, very important point, and very important for I think everyone to remember. Speaking of people, how what type of and with regards to like the younger generation of lawyers who are now currently in law school, uh, how much do you think they could potentially benefit if just legal tech tools were to be made part of law school curriculum? Because when I was going to law school, LexisNexis, Westlaw, these were very common things to use. But when people older than me, when they went to law school, they were not really teaching students to use that. They were still, going to their the bench reporters and looking for all the cases manually. And it's made my life so much easier, because when I talk to someone that's not used to using Westlaw, it's a very genuine barrier. But I learned that in law school, so it's easier for me. Do you think similarly with regards to other tech tools, whether that comes to just automated contract review or drafting or other types of research tools, how much would that help prepare law students for their careers in the future?
Well, so I think there's kind of two different ways that people think about law school. Some people think that the point of law school is to like educate your mind about legal theory and legal concepts of thinking, and really there should be other kind of parts in the process, whether it's like post law school around like training, kind of more like practical training programs, or whether it should be baked into like employers. So there's that school of thought. My school of thought is that, and this is just because it's my nature, I'm not that excited about like the legal theory of it all. Like, I'm more excited about the pragmatism. And so for me, I would 100% be baking in, like you have mandatory legal writing in your first year, I would be baking in legal technology. 100%. Like, my vision of law school is like preparing people for the workplace. And if you want to create streams in second year and third year where it's like more academic or whatever, and people can take more kind of conceptual courses, cool. But I think in year one, it has to be that you have universal training for everyone so that they understand what it's going to mean. I think law school should become much more experiential that way. Technology 100% should be part of that, because you've got to defeat lingo challenge and immediate administration challenge around technology. If you could whack those two things out so that people know what words mean and they know how to sign on to some basic legal tech portal, you've already leapfrogged into the potential of actually using something.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And I do agree with you. I think just educating students to at least getting them exposed to those sort of tech tools, it's just going to make a lot of difference for driving tech adoption, and also like helping those students adapt quicker, because by the time they're ready to be attorneys in 3 years down the line, legal tech is going to be even bigger. And just going off of that point, do you think this new developments in I mean, tech tools in law have been around for a long time? Like the I think some of the first CLM systems started coming out around like the late 80s, which feels crazy, but they did.
I would
It's
love to know what those look like.
Yeah, I haven't seen one, but there was a project that was being conducted at a university. I forget the name, but they had the first conference on legal tech in 1987, the first one.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
and I
incredible.
I learned this at Legal Week. I met someone who was actually present at that conference. He had just graduated from law
Wow,
school. Yeah,
wow,
yeah, I met them
cool.
just this year, and they're telling me, well, this is, I've been to plenty of these. I was at the first one. It's like, well, you're the OG.
That's a great story.
Yeah, and with more tech adoption, and with legal tech companies becoming even bigger, do you think it has also opened up new opportunities for lawyers to pursue the types of careers that they want to pursue, and not just pursue like a very traditional legal career, like just law firms or like in-house, but there's a sea of options available now? How much of that do you think has been with due to like legal tech, or just tech in general?
Yeah, you've really seen that over the last few years, and even maybe especially over the last 18 months, it's become like really palatable that, for a lot of lawyers to think to themselves like, oh, okay, like maybe I could try something else. Like that stigma around like that originally started with, oh, you're not a partner at a law firm, and then was like, oh, you're not a lawyer at a law firm, and then it's like, oh, you're not like a senior in-house. Like it just keeps like broadening out, and I love that because listen, like I'm a lawyer because I watched Matlock as a kid growing up, and I would express myself, and people would be like, "Oh, you should be a lawyer." Like that was the theme as a kid. Like for a lot of people, it's not such an intentional choice. It's something they're good at. It's something that they can do well, but it's not so intentional. And so, what I love about where the industry is going is creating so many different participants in the industry: alternative legal service providers, legal tech, legal marketing, content creators. Like I love how it's broadening out because all these people who might not have had the opportunity to be that intentional growing up can tap into their natural abilities to be like, where can I impact this space the best? It doesn't have to be as a lawyer in a law firm or even a lawyer at all. You can do so many other things because if you have knowledge about the industry, and every industry has its own quirks, if you know the legal quirks, there's so many different ways you can help now. Or coaches, you see all this stuff now. LinkedIn branding consultants, like so many things. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, yeah. It's very exciting as well. It's one of those times where you just take ownership of your career, and you're like, I'm gonna do it
Yeah,
my way. And I
yeah.
love that energy.
And people are doing like multiple at the same time. This is what I'm also a big fan of about like alternative legal service providers is that like the model is you don't have to do it full time. And so you've got people who are doing that 1-2 days a week, and then they're doing content creation, and then they're whatever they're doing, marketing, legal marketing, they're doing all kinds of cool stuff. And I think that's great because it allows people, like you said, to like form a career that's a bit more intentional. Because whenever we're intentional about life, it's more fulfilling. We're not just moving milestone to milestone.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. And your journey is a very good example of that. All your decisions have been, just very intentional, very well thought out. What's the exciting thing? What's the new thing that I can do? And I really admire that energy. And so my last question to you then, Chad, would be, what type of legal tech tools are you most excited about right now?
Well, I think though, I mean, for me, I use automated contracting. So for me, I love it because it's the reason why I get excited about certain things. I think it's because I love actual proof points. I'm not such like a theoretical, ethereal person. I love seeing actual progress in the faces of people I care about. And so when I see automation working at scale, decentralized into the business with the confidence that the data is now there and knowing that I had a hand in building that, I love that. So that part makes me pretty pumped. I mean, but there's so much legal tech that I get, pitched all the time in terms of like, different, like you're saying, AI contract review tools, or, so many things that I think, another interesting one I heard the other day was like one that really helps with KPIs for legal teams. And so I guess it reviews different processes that you do, different, business goals and what the legal team's doing. I actually think that's a pretty cool space, because that's something that lawyers have struggled with forever, is how do you validate your existence? And the problem is putting in legal tech actually works against classic KPIs. Like, we reviewed more contracts, so we supported the business more. Well, automated contracting should actually reverse that. You should want to see less contracts. And so it's funny where we've always struggled with KPIs. And so there was a tool around KPIs that could be pretty cool. So I'm interested to learn about that.
Yeah, that actually sounds very, very, very cool as well, and would be such a huge help to, I think, in-house teams in being able to communicate with the C-suite and the sales team and things like that about the things that they're working on, and where there could be growth. Very cool. Thank you so much for this conversation, Chad. This has been absolutely amazing. Loved all your energy and really insightful as well. Learned a lot about communication, about being thoughtful, and the many ways that legal tech is impacting the legal industry at the moment. And thank you again to all our listeners as well for tuning in every week. Really appreciate your interest in the podcast and in legal tech. We're here every Thursday right around this time with more amazing speakers. And thanks so much once again, Chad. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for doing this. Appreciate everyone that's trying to move this industry forward into, the current generation. So it's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Let's keep moving forward and changing things for the better.
That's right.